Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody. And joining myself and Mikey McCubbin today, we've got Lyes Bouzidi back in the building in a significantly better mood, no doubt, than last time when we were discussing whether Amorim could last until the international break. It's slightly turned around there.
Yeah, I guess we're looking at the next international break. Now the mood is definitely up right now. The win against Liverpool.
Yeah.
Changes everything, man.
Lovely stuff. Mikey was there in front of the cop, keeping things contained just about.
Yeah, I think that was the most my professionalism has ever been tested.
Let me tell you this, you do a better job than I would.
Yeah.
Know that.
Yeah, I was actually kind of quietly impressed at how much I held it together, but inside, I was jumping up and down. Definitely one of the better days of work I've had. So yeah, good fun.
Oh, I'm glad it was. Today, hopefully this is a good fun episode to do, guys. We are ranking the Premier League's best signings so far this season. I'm sure everyone's going to have some honourable mentions as well, but we're going to go 10 to 1, and we're probably going to go sort of 3 at a time. So, Lyes, why don't you kick us off? Who's in your sort of 10 to 7 range?
I looked at Malick Diouf from West Ham. Maybe not someone that too many people will look at because obviously West Ham have had a pretty dire start to the season, but he's almost looking like the rose in like a garden full of weeds at the moment. And there was a lot of hype coming around that transfer when he first made the move. In fact, I think he's made 3 successive moves back to back in the last few years in his career. He looked really impressive. I remember when I watched him for Senegal against England in that friendly before the season started. And for West Ham, again, I think he's been their most consistent, admirable player in such a difficult season. He's got an incredible whip on him. I think his deliveries have been sensational. I think he's a strong, athletic guy as well, too. And I've heard from a few West Ham fans already. They're kind of scared that this might even be another one-and-done season for him and that he might be on the move again after the season. I think the quality he possesses, he almost looks at the moment a step ahead of everyone who's around him. So I've been really impressed with him despite West Ham's start to the season.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's so difficult to shine in a team like that where they do seem so bereft of confidence and organisation. I mean, that display against Brentford was really, really poor, wasn't it? I mean, Mikey, who did you have at 10? Did Diouf come into your sort of reasoning as well?
Yeah, Diouf, I've given an honourable mention too. Didn't quite make the 10. I don't know. I think maybe in terms of impact at a club compared to how the club have performed, maybe Diouf actually does deserve a position in the top 10. But I guess I've focused more on players that have, are playing at clubs that are doing more than West Ham effectively, are making a more considerable contribution and taking them up the table a little bit more. I've actually got. This is a bit of a tentative one, but at number 10, I've gone for Joao Pedro at Chelsea. Now, his form has dropped off a little bit, but I think he's being asked to do an awful lot in the absence of Cole Palmer, in the absence of Liam Delap. I'm not counting the Club World Cup performances, by the way, but I just think that first month at Chelsea, his presence in the box, I think, was something that I don't think many of us necessarily thought was going to be, one of his defining attributes coming into this Chelsea team, and yet he provided that in the first month. And then since then has just had to do a lot of attacking work. You saw him work tirelessly against Nottingham Forest, dropping deep, trying to make things happen. And I think he's only going to get better from here. A lot of his underlying numbers have actually dropped off quite a lot, but I think that is partly to do with the fact that he's playing in this attack where he's often not playing alongside the same players every week.
I think he looked a lot better when Mark Guiu came on and almost allowed him to drop a little deeper and start positions like that. I think it impacted his game a whole lot more. And I agree. The game for me that sticks out for Pedro was against United when they go down a man really, really early and then Palmer's coming off and Neto's coming off and he's almost the only attacker on the pitch for them and he's being asked to make the ball stick against 4 different defenders. Yeah, I completely agree. It's been tough for him.
Yeah, I mean, did he make your top 10?
He came into consideration for me. He definitely could have made it, but I went for a few different players.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Dougie, who do you have at 10?
At 10, I've gone for a little bit of a niche one, but I wanted to reward a midfielder from Leeds, and I thought about Anton Stack, who I think's also been brilliant. But I actually think Sean Longstaff has gone really under the radar. And I think when I was sort of making my list as well, I was thinking about value for money and what I was expecting of a signing and what they've been able to deliver. And Sean Longstaff being signed for £12 million from Newcastle after being, fairly regularly there in the last few seasons, especially when there's been injury issues in that midfield. But I think people were sort of looking at this as kind of a step down in his career, joining a newly promoted side. How would he establish himself? And I think he's done really, really well. I think only Bruno Fernandes has created more chances than him in the entire Premier League. And he's playing for a Leeds side that aren't that thrilling going forward and have struggled for goals. But Longstaff's been doing his bit to provide them. I think he's 5th for tackles completed in the entire Premier League as well. And as I said, I could have definitely put Anton Stack in here as well. And I've got a tendency, and I think we all do in the media, even though I'd loosely put us in the media, we're more sort of content creators, but whatever, to focus too much on the big six and the top sides. Whereas I think getting Leeds into a position where they look like they could have a very reasonable chance of survival this year, I think Longstaff and Stack have been absolutely crucial to that. My 9th place player, guys, brings you guys in quite nicely. I went with Bryan Mbeumo, who I think's actually been a shining light for Man United. Obviously, your results have been really up and down, Lyes, so far this season. But Bryan Mbeumo, not just his quality on the ball, but I think his work rate off it has really impressed.
Yeah, no, I mean, Bryan Mbeumo is on my list. I had him around 8th.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think the first few games for Mbeumo, I was almost hoping for a little more because I think he's an amazing player. And when we signed him, I was really, really excited about that move. And I think the first few games, I almost felt like he was trying to impress too much. That's the vibe I kind of got. I was like, it does feel like now that you're at Man United, you're looking around and it's like, okay, I got to do this, I got to do that. I think once he really settled in, I think that first game that I really saw that was against Burnley when we came back, when we won, was it 3-2 when he grabbed his first goal.
Yeah.
I think that's the first game I really looked at Mbeumo and I'm like, okay, you have fully arrived now. And I think his partnership with Ahmad on the right-hand side is growing every single game. It looked really, really good against Liverpool. We know in front of goal, he has a track record. I look at what he could potentially be for Man United. And I'm going to choose my words very, very carefully because I don't think he's as good as this guy, but I think he could be our version of what Salah is at Liverpool. For me, he's not at the level of Salah, but the role that Salah does in terms of being that threat from outside, getting in goal-scoring positions, that left footer coming off the right-hand side, also has an eye for a pass as well too. I think Mbeumo, the hope for him has to be he can kind of mimic those movements and those actions over the last few years from Salah to a degree at Man United.
It's interesting you bring up the Salah thing because obviously he was tentatively linked as a potential Salah replacement at Liverpool last year, and I never thought he was really the level to be the main man at Liverpool.
Completely.
But I think where United are right now, like you say, I think there are parallels. Mostly the fact that I was looking into his defensive work, that's completely dropped off. Like Amorim is not really requiring Mbeumo to do the kind of defensive work that he did at Brentford, which almost, maybe there's a bit of a parallel between, what Slot did with Salah last season, where he, told him to basically forget about the defensive work and just score goals. But one of the things that has remained in Mbeumo's game is that last season he was making more attacking runs than any player in the league. Mm-hmm. This year, that's the same. Like just having someone who is that direct, who is that good at hanging off the last man and picking up space in that right channel, I think has, it's evolved the way that Man United attack. Whereas last season, there was basically no one bombing on when anyone got the ball, and United still have teething problems. The Liverpool result was amazing and the performance was great in many areas, but was it that much better than the Arsenal performance at the start of the season? I'm not so sure. I think there are still some real problems in this Man United team, but the attack has definitely got better.
100%.
And I think Mbeumo, like Cunha, again, like amazing performance of the weekend, but we just haven't seen quite as much of him on quite as a consistent basis. I feel like Mbeumo has basically been a 7 out of 10 every single game, and even when he's not scoring or assisting, he is always giving someone an option. And for Bruno and Ahmad, that is so important.
He's such a technically consistent player as well. Yeah. His first touch almost always seems to just kill the ball, right? He seems to be making brilliant little, nicely weighted passes as well too. I think that's a side of his game that's massively underrated. Technically, I don't really see too many flaws in his game. He isn't, for me, as explosive 1v1 as a Salah. I think that's where you start to see big differences. Salah, at his prime anyways, he'll get the ball and beat a man. And Mbeumo, I don't think that's really his game, but in terms of his technical quality, I think it's very, very slept on.
I think what you guys were clearly looking for this summer was players to instantly come in and raise the level of the side. And so many signings for you guys over the last 10 years have struggled to replicate what they were showing before at so-called smaller sides, at these bigger sides. Both him and Cunha, I think, have hit the ground running in terms of what you're expecting. Performance-wise, results-wise as a side, clearly need to improve. But the raw ingredients there in terms of attacking numbers are really pretty impressive. Mikey, who are your next couple?
I guess I had Mbeumo in 8th.
Yeah, same.
At 9th, I had Mohammed Kudus. I think 10 to 8 can be quite interchangeable, to be honest. But I think Kudus, he was an exciting signing when he came in. I think, Tottenham were able to pay a bit less than he would otherwise be worth because he was coming off such a poor season at West Ham. But even in that season at West Ham, he was still one of the top dribblers in Europe. And I think that what's great with Kudus is that no matter what kind of performance you get from him, you know that you're going to be guaranteed, like top dribble numbers and also great delivery. And in both of those, he's excelled at Spurs so far. I mean, 3.8 dribbles per 90. He's first in the Premier League for goal-creating actions as well. So he's having a decisive impact in games during a period in which Tottenham are still finding their feet under Thomas Frank, don't quite know exactly what their best attacking lineup is yet, but so many exciting players. You've got Xavi Simons still bedding in. We definitely haven't seen the best of him so far. So to have Kudus come in and hit the ground running, I think has been massive for Spurs. And like the quality of his assists as well has just been great. That ball into the box from the left against Villa, for Paulinho to head down for Bentancur. Stuff like that where without James Maddison in this team, Tottenham really missed that. Kudus, like his versatility across the forward line, has been vital.
I think I know we did a shoot last week with Thomas Frank, which will be coming out on the Sky Sports Premier League YouTube channel in due course, and we were talking about the tactics of Spurs this season. He said Kudus and his ball control and his ability to hold off players, like he's deceptively strong, has actually been quite crucial in terms of Spurs like almost building up through Kudus on the right hand side, with him sort of playing it back to Pedro Porro, and then it's a ball in behind, etc. I think that's how they ended up scoring against Man City in that game where Brennan Johnson scored their second. I actually had Kudus at 7th.
I had Kudus
slightly higher as well. I think only Semenyo and Haaland have been directly involved in more goals, and Spurs, without the goals of Kudus popping up in games where they haven't necessarily always shone, I'm particularly thinking that Leeds game where he scored and got an assist, Spurs' position in the table looks good, but in terms of their underlying numbers and performances so far, I think they're actually slightly fortunate to be as close to the top.
Agreed.
And I think Kudus has been a big part of that. Lyes, I think we've missed out one of yours. Who was your 9?
So at 9, it was between two players. I want to give a big shout out to Estevao, but I just think at the moment maybe we haven't seen enough because he's coming off the bench in a lot of cameos. But I think for his age as well too, he has been brilliant. And when if we're making a list on signings for the next 5-6 years, wow, this kid is going to be a superstar in my opinion. But I actually went on the other end of the spectrum. I didn't go for a youngster. I went for a guy who maybe a lot of people didn't think still had it in him, and that's Jordan Henderson. I think Jordan Henderson for Brentford was one of those signings that maybe when it happened, similar to Longstaff, maybe people sneered at it. Does he still have anything left? His time away from the Premier League wasn't the greatest. I know he kind of rediscovered the Ajax, but maybe a signing that didn't really excite too many people. But I think he's come into a Brentford team that a lot of people maybe had going down. I know I did. And I think he's added a lot of experience. I think he's added a lot of know-how. He's showing that he can still compete at a good level in the Premier League. He's gotten himself back into the England national team. And I think for a team that lost Norgard, which was a big loss, their captain, one of their main midfielders, Henderson has come in and I think pretty decently filled in that gap. So I think a big part of that, similar to what you said in terms of expectation and also value for money, I think Henderson has actually impressed me this season because I did not see this coming from Jordan Henderson.
Yeah, and a big narrative around him at the moment is his continued inclusions in Thomas Tuchel's England squads. And I know you're an Algeria fan and I think Canada.
Yeah.
So not really. You don't have a hat in the England ring, as it were.
Trust me, I'm around you guys all the time. I end up having one.
Sure. But do you understand why Tuchel continues to pick Jordan Henderson, or do you think he should kind of look ahead to the future and go for someone like Adam Wharton, who hasn't been in his last couple?
Let me say this, right? In this country, you guys focus mainly on the England national team. So for good reason, you're largely there's a lot of scrutiny on the England manager and the England team. But I think if you were to look at other countries, this happens throughout the world, right? So there's always a running joke with me that there's so many different nationalities, but I have a large French contingency on my family as well too. So I see a lot of what happens in France and with Didier Deschamps. He's similar in a way in that he goes with the guys that he trusts and goes with the guys that he's seen throughout numerous camps. He just recently brought back Thauvin, who hadn't been in the French national team since 2019, but that's one of his trusted guys. And I can tell you right now, by the way, different quality of player, but if Paul Pogba has any semblance of form returning to Monaco, he will be on the first team back with the French national team. Rabiot the same way. At national team, I think, yes, it matters how good you're doing for your club and how good you're doing in the current moment. But more so than anything, I think national team managers really value players that they can trust. And I think of Jordan Henderson, his experience, his value in the dressing room as well, too, and his time with the England national team. I think he's not going to play a lot at a World Cup, but does it hurt to really have that guy around the team? I'm not too sure it does.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'd love to see Adam Morton eventually break into it, but
trust me.
Tuchel
He should not be there over an Adam Morton. I didn't say that.
But even Loftus-Cheek that's slightly confused.
But how many players go to World Cup? 26.
Yeah, 26. Yeah, you could hopefully get Wharton in the end. My 8th place player, so I talked about Kudus, who was my 7th. I did go with Estevao, actually, as my 8th. Mainly because when he signed, I thought that we were going to mainly see him from sort of December onwards, given his age, given his relative lack of experience with Palmeiras, etc. And I wanted to kind of temper expectations when he arrived. I remember doing a video on my own YouTube channel about him and just said, Vinicius Junior, I think, scored 8 league goals in his first 3 seasons at Real Madrid. And that was a player that was equally thought of in Brazil. So for Estevao to come in and look like a player that has elevated this Chelsea side, which is full of players that they've spent a lot of money on, who are more experienced than him, that we haven't necessarily seen the best of. Neto consistently, Gittins and Garnacho haven't really got going as well. It's really been Cole Palmer and Noni Madueke, who's no longer there, and Nicholas Jackson, who've been kind of carrying that attack in the last few years. For Estevao to come in and look so comfortable at this level already, not necessarily with outstanding numbers, and part of that is due to the fact that he's not started that many games just yet, but he does look absolutely electric, and that assist against West Ham, that huge goal against Liverpool, which felt like a turning point's a bit dramatic because it was, late September, early October, but Chelsea were under a bit of pressure. They kept on picking up red cards, their results were suffering. Now they've won their last 3.
I think they were winless in 3 at one point before that.
Yeah, and now they're going into this game against Ajax, which we obviously don't know the result of, with a lot more confidence around them. And he's completed the most dribbles in the Chelsea squad. No player's got more shots on target than him as well. And only Doku in the entirety of the Premier League can top his 0.4 expected assists. And look, part of that is minutes affected. He's coming off the bench, etc. But I think it's been really bright. And against expectations, I've been really impressed.
I like Estevao as well, too, because it feels like every game that he enters for Chelsea, there is an impact that he's making. It doesn't feel like Estevao comes in and you finish the game, you're thinking, what did Estevao really bring to that game? It feels like he comes in and immediately impacts proceedings. And yeah, the goals are great, the assists are great, but I look at that game against West Ham, he feels instrumental to almost every single Chelsea attack, and I think a large part of that is he's not afraid to take risks. He's not afraid to run out players. He's not afraid to take shots that might fly over the crossbar. He does feel like he plays with a lot of freedom, and even for the Brazilian national team right now, he's impacting games for the senior squad at 18 years old. Tremendous talent.
Yeah. He seems to just have no fear in general. I think it's his overall attitude. This is his first, he's moved from his home country to Europe for the first time at 18, and he's like, when the ball's out of play or whatever, he's giving it to, centre-backs and left-backs who are like 10 years older than
10
him.
years bigger than him too.
Yeah. It's amazing to watch. Like, he clearly feels like he has a point to prove, someone to prove wrong every single time that he's on the pitch. And so far, like Lyes is saying, it's meant that he's had a big impact in every game. And, you could come into the Premier League with all the technical ability that he has and not quite, you might go into your shell a little bit, or you might feel you're not being given the chances, but every time he gets on the ball, he's doing something.
I think it's a big coup for the Premier League as well, too, because when you think of the kind of player that Estevao is, an 18-year-old superstar from Brazil, these are the kinds of players that Barcelona usually pick up the minute they can, Real Madrid. You don't often see these, especially Brazilians, right? I don't think Brazilians have a great track record, especially the attackers, of translating that success to the Premier League. They usually go to Spain. So for the Premier League to pick up what is considered worldwide as one of the best young talents in the game, I think it's a big coup for the Premier League.
Absolutely. Long may it continue from Chelsea's perspective. Right, has everyone done their top sort of 10 to 7? Should we do 6 to 4 next?
I don't think we've done any of our 7s yet.
Oh, I said Kudus was mine. Who was your 7th, Mikey?
Adrien Truffert at
Bournemouth.
Okay. I could have had him higher. I just feel like competition is just getting bigger and bigger the higher we go up this list. But just think he's been great. I mean, for a third of the price or a quarter of the price that they got for Kirkes, to get someone with a ton more experience, I think a more well-rounded left back, like an absolute coup for Bournemouth, third in the league for crosses into the box. And I think on top of that, I think just the defensive solidity that he's helped bring to this Bournemouth team. When they lost, was it 4 of their backline, including Kepa, over the summer, I think is just, absolutely amazing. And I think, the fact that Bournemouth were able to get him over other clubs. This is a guy who won silver with France at the Paris Olympics. I think he got 200 appearances around that for Rennes before leaving, and he's only 23 years old. He was captain of Rennes last season. This is someone who should really be playing in the Champions League, and he may well, Bournemouth actually have a shout of Champions League football this season. So in many ways, it's not surprising. It was funny when I was reading into him, I didn't realise I think one of the reasons potentially why he settled in so well, he actually spent a couple of years on the south coast in England as a child, and apparently he took his first steps on Bournemouth Beach.
Really?
Which is that's
and now he's dominating in the Vitality.
Yeah. So interesting stuff there. But yeah, he's just been.
Have you got any other nuggets like that, Mikey? Throw them in whenever you want. That's great stuff.
I didn't do any more. I didn't do any other research for this episode. That was the only thing I did.
Mbeumo, actually, I heard that his dad, when he was 20 years old, he had a dream about Man United one time, and now his son plays for Man United.
His best mate was Fred the Red growing up.
Yeah, weird.
Oh, love it. Okay, who's your seventh? Yes.
I've gone for Gianluigi Donnarumma.
Nice. I actually didn't consider him. Nice.
Yeah, you know what it is with Donnarumma? I think I have to include him personally because I was a big skeptic of the move when it happened. And I don't think that he has completely proved anyone wrong, because I think some of the worries that people have about him, it's not like they're wrong worries. He still isn't the greatest goalkeeper of his feet. I still think there are question marks claiming crosses. But Man City bought him for one simple reason, and that's to keep the ball out of the net. And since he's come in, City are undefeated. I think City have kept a huge amount of clean sheets for a team that before he arrived had lost 2 games already in the first 3, or in the first 4 maybe. And I look at City this year, and it is a very different City side to the one we've seen across the last decade of Guardiola. It's not a team that for me is as dominant as they used to be between the boxes, but it's a team now that in either of their box, they dominate. Erling Haaland on one end, and Gianluigi Donnarumma on the other. And with Donnarumma, there's a lot of give and take. So you are taking away what made Ederson such a vital piece of that cog. He was the best ball-playing goalkeeper, personally, I've ever seen. Neuer, amazing. But in terms of just ball at your feet, I thought the guy could play midfield. And he was huge to City's build-up and those long passes to Erling Haaland. You lose that when you bring in Donnarumma. But what you gain is maybe the best shot stopper in the world. I mean, he is so dominant at keeping the ball out of his own net. He makes saves that other goalkeepers can only marvel at, and I think it's given a new edge to Manchester City as they kind of try going through this. They are in a transition in a bit, right? De Bruyne has gone. They've lost big players over the years. I think they are still bringing it all together. But you look at City over the last calendar year, for all the worries that some people might have, I think only Arsenal have conceded less goals than them. And I think Donnarumma will only continue to add to that. So I give him a huge amount of credit.
Yeah, I don't think they've lost since he has arrived as well. So yeah, big credit to him. I didn't actually consider him, but at 6, I did have a goalkeeper in Robin Roefs of Sunderland.
Same here.
I was pretty tempted to have 3 or 4 Sunderland players, of course, with my Sunderland hat on. But Robin Roefs has been absolutely phenomenal, and especially given the fact he'd only actually started 1 year of regular football in the Eredivisie, and he looked outstanding in that 1 year. I think he prevented nearly 10 expected goals, but he was still a bit of an unknown. This is a 22-year-old goalkeeper who was replacing Anthony Patterson, who had been our goalkeeper since League One and had made that standing save in the Championship playoff final, one of the best in Championship playoff final history, from Kiefer Moore about 70 seconds in. Robin Roefs comes in, and from the very first minute of that first game against West Ham, or maybe not the first minute, but at least from the very first actions that he had to do, he's just been almost perfect. And he did make one error from that Matty Cash goal against Aston Villa in that game that we drew 1-1, despite being down to 10-10. But there was an amazing swerve on the ball, low sun, whatever. He made a mistake. But aside from that, he's been close to faultless. I think it's only Nick Pope and David Raya that have kept more clean sheets. His save percentage is only topped by David Raya. And in terms of expected goals prevented, it's 9th in Europe and the joint best in the Premier League, along with Dean Henderson, which is so impressive for a 22-year-old. And he plays a quite simple game, as in we sit very compact, very organised. He's extremely good at claiming crosses. His distribution's never going to light up the Champions League, I wouldn't say. But again, in a similar mould to Donnarumma, he does what goalkeepers were traditionally supposed to and expected to do so efficiently and so well. And he's been a big part of Sunderland looking comfortable at this level so far, because the fixtures have been really favourable to Sunderland. And in the next few weeks, there's Chelsea, Everton, Arsenal, Bournemouth, City, Liverpool, Newcastle comes up in December, then it's AFCON. I don't think we'll be 7th forever, but he's been a huge part of us getting to 7th. And I think it has been one of the stories of the season.
Yeah, and getting to 7th at this point for Sunderland is vital to your chances of staying upright. You could have a really comparatively poor rest of the season and still just about do enough to stay up. I think I was looking into it. After 8 games last season, Newcastle didn't have 14 points. I think Bournemouth, even though they had a really good start to the season, I think only had 11 points. So having someone in goal who has moved the needle like that, prevented the expected goals that he has, and just tightened up that, given the likes of Alderete and Mukiele, who, are well experienced.
Well.
But I was very
Sometimes you guys make the summary. You could.
Yeah, so given those players that confidence, even though they are experienced themselves, but they're coming into, this Sunderland team playing together for the first time. It's massive. I had him in 6th as well. Probably, I was tempted to put him higher, if I'm honest.
Yeah, outside shot for the World Cup to start for the Dutch as well. I think Verbruggen's their current number 1. And the Dutch have actually struggled with goalkeepers a little bit since Van der Sar, really. They got an amazing set of centre-backs, probably weak in striker, and their midfielder's pretty decent, but I think they could have a really solid defence. Lyes, who was your number 6?
At number 6, I went for Kudus.
Nice.
At number 6, I went for Kudus. So kind of just to add to what you already spoke on, I thought that Kudus coming out of West Ham was a no-brainer for anyone who wanted to sign him. Obviously, he didn't have his best individual season last year, I think, coupled with the fact that West Ham, again, have kind of been on a downward slope the last few years. But I feel like with football, it's almost like you're only as good as your last game or your last season. People almost seem to forget how good Kudus was in his debut campaign at West Ham, where I thought he was one of the standout signings in the Premier League. I think there were talks about him going for £100 million at one point in his first campaign. I think Spurs did really well to sign him when his stocks were so low. And I think since he's come in, he has been, for me, their most consistent attacker. I think Spurs have been good in some areas, and I think their attack continues to be something where you look at it and say, is there enough experience? Are there enough guaranteed goals in that attack? Matthias Tell, Odo Bear, brilliant young talents. Xavi Simons as well, too. But is there someone you can rely on to consistently put the ball in the back of the net or consistently threaten attackers? And I think Kudus is one of those players that is really dominant in between both boxes. I think there's still more to come in terms of being the one to finish off moves or being the one to kind of get that final action down. I still think I am looking for another step in that regard, but I think he's been brilliant for Spurs. I think he's maybe been their most consistent attacker.
Love it. Right, Mikey, who's your 6? Was your 6 Roofs?
My 6 was Roofs as well.
Okay, we're into the top 5. Mikey, who's your 5th?
Nick Woltemade.
Yeah, me too.
Really? Oh, God, we're on the same wavelength. I think compared to Roofs, compared to even Kudus, I think you could argue that Woltemade hasn't necessarily contributed, all round as much to Newcastle. But then at the same time, before he came in, when, Isak was still in limbo, Newcastle didn't have a centre forward really at all, aside from Mosula coming off the bench against Liverpool. And they were really, really struggling for goals. On top of that, the pressure coming into Newcastle to replace Isak is huge. And I think Woltemade, a little bit like with Estevao, although he is a few years older, so less impressive, and he's only coming from Germany. He's not coming all the way from Brazil, but he does seem, he seems to embody so much confidence. And when you're coming into the Premier League as a centre forward, you need to have that. And he's looks so relaxed. He's been so relaxed in interviews. And his range of goals so far has been excellent. Despite being huge, heading wasn't necessarily one of the things that was getting talked about before he arrived, but he's, 2 of his goals have been headers. His link-up play has been brilliant. I think for that third goal, I know Benfica were pretty tired at that point, but that link-up between him and Gordon before Gordon sets up Harvey Barnes for that final goal against Benfica on Tuesday night was absolutely magical. Yeah, I've been really, really impressed by him. And for Newcastle as well, when we're talking about value, I know they overpaid for Wissa, and the injury has painted that even starker. But shifting Isak for the price that they did, a British transfer record, and then bringing in Woltemade for not really any more than any other promising striker has gone for this summer to a Premier League club, and for him to hit the ground running as well is pretty great stuff. I could probably predict that, well, not predict, but I imagine that if Isak had stayed at Newcastle, because of how much he had to get up to speed after the summer, not playing any football or training or anything, that Isak would have fewer goals for Newcastle right now than Woltemade. So in terms of a start to the season, impact for the club, transfer business, the price that they paid, I think Woltemade's been
I think it's important to remember Woltemade, right? He was their 6th choice option this summer. They went through every striker on the planet before they ultimately got to him. There was Joao Pedro, there was Sesko, was it Liam Delap as well too?
Yeah, Liam Delap.
There were a few guys that Newcastle lined up as potentially Isak's success. Yeah, he was the biggest one.
I think I feel like maybe Ekitike is the one who I would have backed to have had as big an impact.
But it almost does feel like they stumbled into Woltemade, right? Like he wasn't anywhere near their first choice. But you look at how good he's been since he's come in. I think when you look at the strikers that joined the Premier League or that have been on the move this summer, it's very clear to see where the meta of football kind of is going. We're returning to an era of big strikers. You look at Sesko at United, Isak, of course, as well, too. Haaland is the main man in that regard. But Woltemade kind of represents that, I think, excellently in terms of a big striker. Not clunky, though, whatsoever. He's so good with his feet. He's so technically gifted. Very, very calm in certain situations as well, too. Some of the collection of goals that he's scored this season. I mean, the flicks, the headers, the finishes, the link-up play. I've been so impressed with Woltemade, and I think the best is going to come as well, too, when you see Wissa next to him. I'm actually really interested in seeing how the two of them maybe play in a pair. Maybe one of them plays off the other. Maybe one of them's coming on for the other. I think Newcastle have done really good business in that regard. And with Woltemade, there's a bit of an unknown with him because last season was really his breakout campaign despite his age. And yes, he was very good for Stuttgart, but it was like, is it just form or is this what you're kind of representing? And since he's come to Newcastle, I've been so impressed.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, he had only started 29 league games over the previous 2 seasons. So this is a relatively raw player and had an amazing summer at the under-21 Euros, of course, had that linked move to Bayern, had Karl-Heinz Rummenigge going public and saying that they've overpaid for him, which must be really dispiriting to hear that from a sort of ex-player who's so well respected in the German game as well. Although Karl-Heinz Rummenigge running his mouth is not a rare occurrence, really. But Woltemade, to come into a Newcastle side that were dealing with the loss of their outstanding player of the last 10 years, probably, really since Shearer's gone, and pick up the mantle so easily, really, really impressive. And although results have been quite poor for Newcastle, I think they've only won 2 league games. Results in Europe have been much better, but they've only beaten Wolves and Nottingham Forest, who are obviously onto their 3rd manager of the season now, and they're 5 points behind Sunderland, which I am enjoying at the moment. But their performance level, I think Newcastle has actually been pretty solid, and I do expect them to rise up the table pretty quickly. And with Woltemade having hit the ground running, I think he'll be very difficult to displace from that forward line at any stage this season, although having Johan Wissel back does give Eddie Howe more options. So I had him at 5 as well. Yeah. Lyes, who was your 5th?
At number 4... I have Granit Xhaka.
Okay.
I got Granit Xhaka.
Was Woltemade your 5th?
He was my 5th.
Okay, so we're all there.
Granit Xhaka is my 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not. You know how you got him at number 1. Granit Xhaka. I talked about how shocked I was about how Jordan Henderson has almost just come back, and it's like he never left. Xhaka, for me, the minute that signing happened, I was like, yeah, this makes so much sense. This is like, for me, when Leicester signed Cambiasso, right? Newly promoted, and you need an elder statesman who's got experience across Europe and at international level, and he just comes in. I love the fact that they gave him the armband from day one, and it almost feels like he's just accepted that responsibility and ran with it. And yeah, there's been a lot of moving parts at Sunderland, but I think it helps when one of them is a player with this much vast experience. I mean, this guy was playing the Champions League a year ago. 2 years ago, he was one of the key contributors to a team who went undefeated in the league, and he's come into Sunderland, a whole new environment, a whole new challenge, and just taking it head on. And we know what Granit Xhaka is about, right? Leadership, tough tackling, dominating midfield, but even creatively this season, I feel as well, too. He's taken that another step forward. He has been so impressive for Sunderland, and we're talking about one of the best signings in the Premier League. I think he's been one of the best signings across Europe, period.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe the best value signing of the summer. Was it 10, 11 million pounds?
12, yeah.
Just like given what he achieved at Leverkusen, and yeah, you talk about like them giving him the armband straight away. I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of the negotiation. Yeah, like, you're going to come in, you're going to be captain.
He was meant to go back home to Basel. I think he even showed, because his brother, I think, just left this past summer, and he showed up and said, "I'll be back. Don't worry. Like I'll be the one to replace him." And then I see him rocking up at Sunderland like a week later. I was like, "Oh wow, they must have."
Ten Hag said he can't go anywhere as well, and he just went, "No, Eric, see you later."
Went. Like, and he must have been so, and it was a great choice by him. I mean, again, like, you know, there will be tougher times to come for Sunderland this season, like you were alluding to earlier.
He's one of those guys you want to go into war with. Honestly, those tougher times, he's built for that. Xhaka, man, he's made for a club like Sunderland, in my opinion.
And I think also when you look at like the way that his skill set dovetails so nicely with Siddiqui's and Diarra's in that midfield. And those are young, really young players, you know, midfielders coming into the Premier League who so far have looked pretty adept. I don't know. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, Sunderland's recruitment team were like, yeah, like, well, this is exactly how you're going to fit in. You're going to be playing with these players who are really suited to your game. You're going to do all the passing from midfield. They're going to do all the ball carrying. And it looked amazing so far. I mean, I was looking into it. Like, Granit Xhaka, I think, is averaging 5.8 progressive passes per 90 this season. When you compare that to Crystal Palace, who have around the same possession, like they have about 44% possession as well, the same as Sunderland. They have Will Hughes and Adam Wharton putting up over 5 progressive passes per 90. Each. So Granit Xhaka's having to do basically all of the ball progression in that midfield. Siddiqui and Diarra basically do none, at least in terms of their passing. They're the ones who are having to carry the ball. But his impact in just all facets. I think he's putting up more tackles and interceptions than he ever has done in his career, or at least since his early days at Arsenal. He's winning more aerial duels than he's ever done in his career, which is pretty mad. I think he's winning more than everyone. I think he's winning more than anyone in that Sunderland team, which is pretty mad given the aerial ability of those centre backs.
And also, you guys have got him a bit low. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I don't know. My 2 and 1 are pretty high. So I've got him in 3. I haven't revealed my 4th yet. But I think the most striking thing though is that the quality of his delivery and the quality of his decisive chances, which have resulted in goals, have won Sunderland 7 points this year. That is wild. That last minute ball into Isidore against Brentford. And then I can't remember the other ones.
Assisted against Nottingham Forest.
Assisted for Nottingham Forest Alderete. That was also the winning goal in that game. And then the other assist, that looped header, cushioned header over the top against Aston Villa, which won them a point. So 7 points already. He has directly contributed for Sunderland this season. Half of the total points tally.
You come from the Championship, right? A player of Xhaka's quality, right? Again, he's played in the biggest games in the world. He's played in World Cup games, he's played in Euros, he's played in Champions League games, big Premier League deciders. You bring a player like that around, with all the Sunderland team who were in the Championship last year. I just think you train with a guy like that every single day. You see the way he prepares himself, the way he takes care of himself. I almost feel like the levels around you just have to increase. Yeah. I think the impact a player like that has on a newly promoted team, again, similar to what Cambiasso must have done at Leicester City. You see a guy who's a Champions League winner. You see a guy who's an Argentine international. You guys just came from the Championship. You must just look at that and say, okay, I got to bring my level up to this guy's.
Well, also, and what it paved the way for was other players playing for Champions League clubs to come to Sunderland, like Nordi Mukiele and Geertruida, who we've barely seen so far, and Brian Brobby coming from Ajax, and Bertrand Traore coming from Ajax. These players don't go to Sunderland unless Granit Xhaka goes there.
Sure, yeah.
And as you say, for a squad that I think is the second youngest or the youngest, it's between Chelsea and Sunderland in the Premier League, to have Granit Xhaka, who's been there, done that, played years in the Premier League, not just around Europe as well. He's been absolutely massive, and I strongly advise everyone watching this, follow him on social media as well, because he's brilliant. I'm liking everything, I'm retweeting, I'm doing it all. I'm really, really enjoying it. My 4th though, because Granit Xhaka is a little bit higher, my 4th was Jack Grealish.
He's a lot higher for me.
Yeah, he's number 1.
No, he's a lot higher for me.
A lot higher, yeah. I mean, the 4-1 is, these are all top players having brilliant seasons, but I think it's just so refreshing to see a player that a lot of people had kind of not forgotten about, but slightly disrespected, I think, in the last couple of years. Everyone's saying, Pep ruined him, etc. Look, his first year, or that treble year at least, 22-23, Grealish was great, particularly down that second half of the season. He lost his way in the final 2 years there, and he's already close to matching his minutes played for Man City last year at Everton this year. But I think already the kind of mood shift that he's brought about at Everton, having spent a lot more money this summer than they have in previous years, having joined this new stadium with other entertainers now in that squad, like Iliman Ndiaye and Dewsbury Hall in particular, they've kind of compensated for the fact that neither Beto or Tiano Barry have looked brilliant so far as striker, and just made Everton look really, really entertaining, fun to watch in every game. And Grealish has just brought this swagger to Everton. And for a player of his quality, he must be thinking Everton's the perfect place to kind of show what he's all about and get back in this England squad as well. Because if he maintains this level of performance, I think he should probably go on that plane as well. There is a couple of stats that I really think, sort of symbolise everything that he's brought. Like, no player has carried the ball into the box more often. Only Yeremi Doku has completed more progressive carries. And for an Everton side and a Moyes side that are never going to try and camp in the opposition half, for example, having a player like Grealish and Iliman and Jai who can break lines and, burst past a few players and then pick out passes. And a lot of his assists, he has got 4 so far, have been quite simple passes. And we haven't necessarily seen, the eye-catching moments that we have seen at Villa in previous years just yet. But it's coming. And I think Grealish has been absolutely superb.
Yeah, I think that it's the way that attack functions as well. Because Everton are a more counter-attacking side, he's able to pick up those spaces that he just didn't have at City. I think a lot of his most meaningful contributions in the final third have come when he's the last player to receive the ball out of the 3. That space just opens up with Njai and Dewsbury Hall having dragged those players away from him, and suddenly he's one-on-one, which we never saw that at City because, he was receiving the ball with, a midfielder and a full-back on him as City tried to break through a deep block. It just, the style of play just suits him so much more. I actually had him at 2. My number 4 was Hugo Ekitike. I wonder where he's the same for you. And again, it's just sad that we haven't seen him that much in the last month because obviously Isak's yet to really get going in a Liverpool shirt, but it's obviously hard to leave out a player, that you spent that much money on. And it's a real dilemma, but Ekitike has been by far Liverpool's most effective signing so far this season. And I think Liverpool would be higher up the table right now if he was starting the last 3 games rather than Isak. Obviously, he has himself to blame for missing the Palace game, obviously with that red card against Southampton. But even then, I think the reason why he lifted his shirt up to the crowd was because that was Isak. Was that Isak's first start for Liverpool and his first goal? He was kind of reminding everyone, I am here to battle for that place with Isak. I think he's completing as many take-ons as Eberechi Eze for Arsenal this season, and with a similar kind of success rate. And I think those are basically the 2 best attackers in the league for that. And given his finishing ability so far as well, scoring above his expected goals and everything else that he brings to this Liverpool team, he looks like what Liverpool fans were anticipating they were getting with Isak. And obviously they have very similar kinds of games, similar style of play, similar build, but Ekitike just looks, at his best at the moment. Isak doesn't. I think he needs to be back in this Liverpool team as soon as possible as a centre forward. As a centre forward, we saw Liverpool, Arne Slot try everything against United towards the back end of that game. Slot got a lot of criticism for his subs and the timing of them. I think aside from not bringing off Salah earlier, I think he did all he could, and with Ekitike in particular, he looked like the best player on the pitch. As soon as he came on, he looked like the best player on the pitch. And I think if Maguire doesn't score when he does, I back Ekitike to have made something happen in those last 10 minutes and for Liverpool to have got a goal. I know Gakpo also misses that opportunity at 2-1 down as well. But Ekitike just looked so dangerous, and against a tired Man United defence with Yoro on, probably a bit disoriented. I think he would have done some real damage.
He was the scariest player when he came on, for sure. I mean, the minute he came on, he's running at players, he's taking shots. He was terrifying. Honestly, I completely agree from a United point of view. I honestly feel so bad for him at the moment, but it's not something that I don't think anyone could have predicted. This whole idea that teams in 2025, when all of them play with 1 striker, can employ 2 elite center forwards and they're just going to magically coexist together. I'm happy to... I think, in my opinion, there's 2 positions, well, maybe a bit more, but there's 2 main positions that you don't rotate when a guy is firing. That's goalkeeper and that's striker. I remember when Raya and Ramsdale came in together and Arteta had this idea, all of a sudden, we might be the first team to rotate goalkeepers. It never happened because when your guy is in form, you play him through that form. For me, it's similar with center forward, and I feel so bad for Ekitike, who started the season incredibly, and granted, the red card happened, but that red card happened 5 games ago. Isak, they're trying to bring him into form because of how much money he spent. But if you're looking at it logically, the player in form right now, who should have started at the weekend, is Hugo Ekitike. But it does feel like there is pressure from above to start the Premier League record signing. And I think at the moment, that pressure to maybe play big names rather than who actually suits the system at this current moment is part of the reason why Liverpool have struggled. Just to kind of back off what you said about Grealish as well too. I think last year, Villa players were talking about when Marcus Rashford came into the team, you could see a level increase in training. This is an England international. This is a Champions League level player. I think similar has happened at Everton as well too. This is a guy, Jack Grealish, who wasn't an overwhelming success at City. I don't think anyone would say that, but he still impacted big games for them across the years. He's a treble winner. He's a guy who's played at tournaments for England. I think you introduce a player like that at Everton, who have experienced players, but especially in their attack, have a lot of inexperience in the likes of Dibbling, in the likes of Njai, Barry. I think having a player of Jack Grealish's experience who has been there, done that at this level can only impact those guys. And I think it's been so wonderful to see him return. I think, like you said, there is still a level for him to get to. I don't think we're even close to seeing the best Jack Grealish, but I think that tells you what kind of player he is, and I've been really happy to see him thrive at Everton.
He also must just be so fun to train with as well, and what that brings to like the team morale as well. If you're practicing attacking moves and you've got Njai and Grealish there, it's just like that makes your job really enjoyable throughout the week, and I think in turn that contributes to Everton, as a team, going that one step further late in games.
Do you want to know a little potential contentious moment of the episode?
Okay.
I didn't include Ekitike in my top 10.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's mad.
I might live to regret
That's
that
mad.
because they are playing Eintracht Frankfurt tonight, and
player
and Eintracht Frankfurt
people might be watching this and he might have got a hat-trick.
Incredibly leaky defensively. But look, in terms of honourable mentions, there was loads of quality players that I left out. I didn't include Tijjani Reijnders, I didn't include Joao Pedro, I didn't include Eze, I didn't include Seni Lamons, although 2 games is not very much.
That's
but
all I needed to see. I thought about him.
Yeah.
Number 1.
And even Yeremi Pino, I think, has a case to be included as well, given his impact at Palace since replacing Eze. Look, it's nothing against Ekitike. I think of these honourable mentions, he's probably the closest to this top 10, but I wanted to reward players that have been playing regularly. And I do think sometimes that value for money comes into it. And maybe I picked a Longstaff or a Truffert who I'll come on to in due course, or Xhaka was always going to get in because it's me, but some other players over him.
Where are we up to, by the way? I've lost count.
I think we're in our top 3 now.
Top 3.
Area. Lies, what's your top 3? Why don't we just go for it?
So my top 3, I had Nick Woltemade at 3. I had Jack Grealish at 2. I know we spoke about both of them. I think Grealish as a loan has been fantastic. But at number 1, I have Martin Zubimendi.
Same.
Nice.
I think he has just fit like a glove at Arsenal. He's one of those signings, again, I feel like when that signing happened, it just made sense. They lost a few players in midfield this summer, and I think he's come in and actually elevated them in that regard. They already had one of the best midfields in European football at the moment, but I think Zubimendi has just taken them another level. Obviously, I think we know everything that he possesses on the ball. He's a fantastic footballer, so good at playing through between the lines, dropping deep, receiving, and build up. But I also think he's impacted so many players around him. I think he's already struck such a good dynamic up with Declan Rice. At times you see Declan Rice dropping deep and build up. At times you see Zubimendi. But Zubimendi in the final third as well too has shown remarkable quality that maybe I wasn't too familiar with. I've always seen him as your first phase dictator in build up, but in the final third as well too, this guy's nifty. This guy can create chances. He's got a few goals to his name as well too. I think he's just taken Arsenal another level, which was extremely difficult to do because Arsenal are such a good side. But I think with him in that midfield, I mean, they look like a contender for every single trophy that they're in.
Yeah, I think some of the balls he's played over the top around the box, absolutely remarkable. And Declan Rice's long-range passing this season's been incredible. But I think Zubimendi, in terms of those punch-through balls and just balls into it, I think it's no surprise that Arsenal just look so much more fluid than they did in previous years as well. And actually, he's more aggressive than you think as well. Like he's prepared to
he's feisty, man.
He's prepared to contest aerial duels. He's prepared to nudge people out of the way before dropping the ball. And his first thought is always forward, and it's just so refreshing. So much pointless possession in every league now. In many ways, after the sort of introduction of Pep Guardiola in the last 10 years, etc. Zubimendi's kind of against the grain in that sense that he can play it safe if he needs to. But I think he's just so bold.
You know what's funny actually? The last few years, I've always felt that Arsenal sometimes look at their best when it's almost Jorginho and Declan Rice playing in midfield together. Right? I've really liked that combination together. But Jorginho, at this current age, we do know he has limitations, especially physically. I almost feel in Zubimendi, they are getting an upgraded version of that version of Jorginho. I feel like he brings a lot of the same qualities that Jorginho does, but then you can rely on him to cover more ground. You can rely on him to win more of his individual duels. I think he's a bit more brave with his passing at times. So I think, wow, what a bit of signing. What a bit of transfer for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the defensive work that he brings, it's allowed Declan Rice to, take his game to a new level. And I was looking at their heat maps, and it's really interesting. Both Zubimendi and Rice last season, for their respective clubs, were covering, from left to right, basically covering all the ground in that central midfield area. This season, Rice is way more focused on the left and the left half space towards the box. But generally speaking, more specifically, he's operating on the left, in the left channel, on the left hand side of the pitch. Zubimendi is covering much more specifically on the right. I feel like across an entire season, they are going to be much less tired. I mean, we've already seen both of them not start games. Whereas, they're both used to being ever present because they have to be there. But I can't remember which game. Was it the Forest game where Zubimendi scored twice that Rice didn't start?
One of them an absolutely beautiful
Yeah,
goal
I mean, both really well taken goals. Not only the fact that, Arteta now has the privilege of being able to rest either Rice or Zubimendi if he feels he needs to, or he just, wants to bring one of them on late in game because he just knows that he's got enough depth there now in midfield. But I think the actual jobs that they're doing should mean that they're not going to be anywhere near as tired towards the end of the season. And at the moment, at least, I know it's still relatively early days after 8 games and after just a couple of Champions League games, but Arsenal look like favourites for the Premier League, and they look like probably one of the 2 or 3 favourites for the Champions League. And Zubimendi, his style of play, but also what he's allowed Arteta to do with that midfield. And let's remember as well, Eze now is pretty much ever present in that midfield, and his ball carrying and dribbling ability is going to in turn take a lot more pressure off, Saka, create more chances for Gyökeres. But without Zubimendi there, Eze's not going to have that freedom himself. So it just feels like everything's falling into place in that midfield.
Nice. Mikey, who are your top 2?
So Zubimendi was my number 1. Number 2 for me was Jack Grealish. And spoken about him a ton already. But his ball carrying into the box this season is just an absolute joke. And I actually saw another thing that I think he's attempting a higher number of dribbles and completing a lower percentage of dribbles than he ever has done in his career. But I think it kind of makes sense when he is constantly in those really penetrative positions where you're likely to get tackled, but the fact that he's just having fun, like that, just constantly trying to take a man on, is just great to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I said at the start of the show that I was valuing a lot about value for money and the kind of what expectations were when a signing was made, etc. So at 3, I actually had Truffert. I could have gone with Ekitike as well. I think you kind of do need to reward a side that are sitting in 3rd in the Premier League in Bournemouth at the moment. I think Truffert, we actually did a space at the end of the window, and I think Bournemouth had 2 games by then, and the person we had on, who I'm really sorry I can't remember her name, she spoke really eloquently, and she said Truffert already looks better than Kirkes, and I was like, maybe you've gone a bit hot, but so far he looks absolutely brilliant. And given the fact that Kirkes played every single game last year, stepping in with big shoes, and we've seen a lot of signings struggle having made that step up to Champions League clubs, and generally the replacements, the Woltemades, the Trufferts, have done pretty well so far. At 2, I had Zubimendi. This is a toss-up, but at 1, I had Granit Xhaka.
It was never a toss-up.
At 1, I had Granit Xhaka.
Where you considered Zubimendi at number 1.
I just think 3 out of Sunderland's 9 goals have come from his boot. I think he's 7th for passes into the final third in the entire Premier League. And what it meant in terms of the other signings that then joined Sunderland has built a very competitive side for a team that were as close to 17th place in the Championship last year as they were 1st and 2nd. And I do think it's one of the stories of the season so far. So well done, Zubimendi, but you're in 2nd place for me, whereas you guys had him top. So I think Zubimendi's the overall kind of rated as the best signing of the season so far. But guys, let us know your thoughts on all our thoughts and your top 10s in the comments section as well. Who did we miss out? Who should we have included? Was it a shocker to not have Ekitike? Get all of your thoughts down there. Lyes, if people have enjoyed watching this, which they no doubt have, where can they find your stuff?
Yeah, they can find me everywhere these days. On YouTube, Instagram, X, Twitch, just Lyes Bouzidi, my name.
And the 7-a-side pitch as well. We played 7-a-side with him last week. There's a little bit of techie Zidane in there as well.
Yo, I'm putting that on my, honestly, that's going on every resume. A little bit of Zidane. Hey, man.
There's a little bit of Zidane, but in similar sort of French-Algerian style. There's a bit of head dropping towards the end of the game as well.
I don't do defending.
Thank you so much for watching The Lowdown, guys. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.